Well, one of Mexico's most violent cartels is suspected of leaving some gruesome warning.
What you're about to hear will change how you view organized crime forever. In the summer of 2018, a video surfaced that made an entire nation weep. A father and son, bound and helpless, facing unimaginable horror. But this wasn't an isolated incident. It was just another day in the world of Mexican cartels, where human life means nothing and suffering is an art form. Public displays of dominance. The ultimate goal of cartel violence isn't just elimination, it's communication. Every brutal act sends a message to rivals, authorities, and the general population about who controls territory and what happens to those who resist. Bridge hangings became a signature move, with bodies displayed in broad daylight for maximum impact. In 2021, 9 bodies were found hanging from a bridge in Zacatecas, left for hours before authorities removed them. These weren't random killings, they were territorial markers, human billboards advertising cartel dominance. The psychological impact extended far beyond the immediate victims. Children walking to school would see these displays, teachers would call in sick rather than pass beneath hanging bodies, and entire communities would modify their daily routines around cartel messaging. This public theater of violence served multiple purposes, intimidating rivals, warning potential informants, and demonstrating to law enforcement that cartels operated with impunity. Each display was carefully choreographed for maximum psychological impact on the widest possible audience. Water torture with a Mexican twist. During El Chapo's trial in 2019, prosecutors revealed a torture method that combined historical techniques with modern sadism. Called Tehuacanazo, it was waterboarding evolved into something far worse. Traditional waterboarding uses water to simulate drowning. Mexican cartels replaced water with carbonated soda, often mixed with chili peppers. The carbonation created additional agony as bubbles burst in the victim's nose and throat, while the peppers added burning pain to the sensation of drowning. The wet cloth covering the face intensified the psychological torture. Victims couldn't see when the next wave would come, trapped in darkness with only the sound of liquid being poured. The intermittent nature was deliberate. Continuous pouring would cause death too quickly. Instead, victims endured hours of simulated drowning, their minds breaking long before their bodies gave out. This method left no permanent physical marks, making it perfect for extracting information while maintaining the victim's ability to communicate. The psychological damage, however, was irreversible. Survivors described permanent fear of water and inability to breathe normally for months afterward. The ritual of cannibalism. Perhaps the most shocking revelation came from former cartel members who described initiation rituals that crossed every line of human decency. The CJNG cartel, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, used cannibalism as a training tool. New recruits weren't just taught to kill, they were taught to consume. Starting with fingers and toes, initiates had to eat dismembered body parts to prove their commitment. Those who vomited were forced to consume their own regurgitated flesh until they could complete the ritual without reaction. The training escalated to sleeping beside corpses, designed to desensitize recruits to death and humanity itself. Miguel Trevino Morales, known as Z40, took this further by consuming the hearts of his victims, believing it granted him spiritual invincibility against enemies and law enforcement. This wasn't random brutality, it was calculated psychological conditioning. By forcing recruits to cross the ultimate taboo, cartels ensured absolute loyalty. Once someone had eaten human flesh, they could never return to normal society. They belonged to the cartel completely. Psychological warfare and living nightmares. Beyond physical torture lies something even more sinister. The systematic destruction of the human mind. Cartels discovered that breaking someone psychologically was often more effective than any physical pain. Victims would be confined in small, windowless rooms with minimal food and water. The isolation was deliberate. No human contact except for their torturers. They'd be subjected to terrifying sounds, disturbing images, and mock executions that brought them to the brink of death before pulling back. The psychological manipulation was surgical in its precision. For minor infractions, victims might lose a finger. The message was clear: compliance or escalation. Many victims, driven to madness by fear, would confess to crimes they never committed just to end the mental torment. Maria Santos Garreta Salazar, former mayor of a small Mexican town, experienced this firsthand when the Knights Templar cartel kidnapped her in 2012. They forced her to watch as her husband was burned alive with a blowtorch, then murdered 4 more victims in the same manner. She was sexually assaulted before being killed, her autopsy revealing death by traumatic head injury. This wasn't about information extraction. It was about power. The cartel wanted her to understand their dominance before they ended her life, using her final moments to cement their control through pure terror. The Cartel Kitchen Network. Deep in the mountains of Veracruz, investigators discovered something that defied comprehension. They called them cartel kitchens, but these weren't places where food was prepared. The crunch of bones beneath ash-covered floors told a different story entirely. Since 2006, over 60,000 people have simply vanished in Mexico. Not killed in shootouts or found dead in the streets, they disappeared completely. The answer lies in these horrific facilities scattered across 12 locations, where Los Zetas cartel perfected the art of making people disappear forever. The process was methodical. Targets would be stalked for weeks, learning their routines, their weaknesses. Then came the abduction. Swift, silent, complete. Victims found themselves in rooms with bloody handprints staining the walls, the smell of death overwhelming their senses. The psychological torture began before any physical pain was inflicted. What happened next was systematic extraction, not just of information but of human dignity itself. After hours or days of unthinkable suffering, the bodies would be incinerated, leaving behind only fragments of teeth, nails, and bone. Families searched for years, never knowing their loved ones had been reduced to ash beneath their feet. The most chilling part? Authorities discovered these sites in 2017, but families had been begging them to search the properties since 2011. Each investigation revealed what previous searches had somehow missed: more bones, more victims, more evidence of industrial-scale human disposal. The acid bath method, El Guiso. Santiago Meza Lopez never imagined his childhood poverty would lead him to become Mexico's most notorious body disposer. Known as El Pozolero, the stew maker, he turned human dissolution into a science. Working for the Tijuana Cartel, Lopez perfected what became known as El Guiso, the stew. Using massive oil drums, he would create a deadly cocktail of concentrated sulfuric acid and water, heating it until it boiled and spat dangerous liquid. Victims, still breathing, would be lowered into this chemical hell. The process wasn't quick. Bodies would be stirred for 8 hours minimum, the acid eating through flesh, while the victim experienced agony beyond human comprehension. What remained, teeth, nails, small bone fragments, would be burned again with gasoline and buried in wasteland. Lopez claimed responsibility for over 300 bodies, turning human beings into liquid that could be poured down drains or dumped in pits. When authorities raided his ranch, they found the remains of 14,000 people, a number so staggering it defied belief. The most disturbing aspect? Lopez insisted he was forced into this role, threatened with violence if he refused. Whether coercion or choice, he continued this work for over a decade, becoming the cartel's most valuable asset in covering their tracks. The methods we've explored today represent more than just violence. They're a window into what happens when human beings are stripped of all moral constraints. These aren't random acts of cruelty, but calculated systems designed to maintain power through absolute terror. Understanding this darkness isn't about glorifying violence. It's about recognizing the depths of human evil and the importance of institutions that protect us from it. The victims we've discussed today weren't just statistics. They were sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers whose lives were stolen in the most unthinkable ways. If this content opened your eyes to realities you never knew existed, show your support by hitting that like button. And if you want to explore more hidden truths about our world, make sure to subscribe, because knowledge, even uncomfortable knowledge, is power. The fight against organized crime continues, and awareness is the first step toward justice for the thousands who disappeared into the darkness of cartel violence.